Professor Oksana Mont, who works with consumption and sharing and a whole range of projects and processes, you could say. So welcome here today, Oksana. My first question to you is if you could tell us a little bit about one of your main projects. Hopefully Oksana appears on the screen. One of your main projects, the Urban Sharing Project. Can you kind of give us some insights into this project and how you work with such a project and why it's relevant to this kind of discussion? Floor is yours.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And hello, everybody. Really great to be in this forum and see many colleagues and researchers and practitioners from around the world. Really fantastic. Right, our Urban Sharing Project is actually a 5-year research program at Lund University, and it's funded by European Research Council. And it explores the design and operations of sharing organizations in 3 sectors: space, mobility, and physical goods. So those that are dealing with the sharing of some material things. We look at their sustainability impacts, and also we try to understand institutionalization pathways of sharing organizations and sharing economy at large across 5 cities. So we're looking at 5 global cities, including Amsterdam, Melbourne, Seoul, Toronto, and Shanghai. And we are 2 years into the program. And it's quite unusual, and we're so thankful to the European Research Council who funds this project, because it gives us an opportunity to really go at it and trying to understand the nitty-gritty details of how sharing is working in for-profit and non-profit organizations around the world in different cultural and social contexts and in different sectors. So it's really great.
Yeah, no, so it's really connecting with different parts of the world, from Melbourne to Seoul and so on. But just continuing on from that, I mean, from this kind of work that you're doing, Oksana, I mean, what are some of the current challenges? There's a fairly obvious one in the coronavirus, but what are some of the current challenges and trends for urban sharing as you see it?
Right. From what we see is, of course, cities face multiple challenges when it comes to urban sharing, but today, maybe I would like to focus on 2 of them. One is the obvious one, of course, COVID-19 challenge that really cut through the very essence of the sharing economy, which is social interaction and exchange. And so many sharing organizations have been really hit hard by the pandemic. Of course, it's a temporary challenge, but we still see that many organizations chose to close down or drastically reduce their operations. Luckily, there are some of them who found the possibility to adjust and reinvent their business model, so they keep their operations, but with quite a different or additional set of services they provide. And one trend we spotted in the recent research on actually how companies are responding to the coronavirus is that many of them start exhibiting the true spirit of sharing. And have engaged in helping many actors in cities around the world. So we find examples of companies that are providing free homes or free rides to frontline health workers. We find organizations that deliver medicine and necessities and food to vulnerable groups in different societies. So this is the trend, and I think cities can capitalize on this trend and first perhaps identify what are the gaps in public services that these sharing organizations are filling, how can they leverage these services, and how can cities can help amplify this value creation in the long-term run and to secure long-term resilience of cities. So this is first one. And the second one is probably also maybe not so obvious to many, but who are not working with kind of the physicality of sharing, is the challenge for many of the sharing organizations to balance economic strength of their organizations, operations with sustainability aspirations. And we all know that sharing economy builds on the traditional sharing among family and friends that has helped us survive throughout history. In the past decade, the sharing organizations evolved into more formal forms of sharing among strangers. But then many of the smaller and local sharing organizations, they're really that are built on sustainability issues or values. They often struggle economically for long-term survival. And on the other hand, we see that many large sharing organizations, they are backed up by huge investments, but they seem to lose their sustainability aspirations in hard competition and in the struggle for return on investments. So again, it's challenging for both groups of sharing organizations to be sustainable, but in very different ways. And here I maybe see a critical role for investors and cities and consumers to support this sustainable value creation in cities. And one emerging kind of teeny tiny trend we see is that some investors start looking for sustainability credentials of sharing organizations when they make the investment decision. So this is one trend that we can really support and push for. Another development is that some sharing cities start seeing value in supporting the smaller and local sharing organizations, but they're also again struggling with finding this economically feasible business model or value creation model for these small organizations. And then I was thinking, we very seldom talk about the role of consumers. And consumers do have power on their market, and we are used to voting on the markets with our kronas and dollars and euros, choosing sustainable and socially and environmentally sustainable products. We don't see that yet in sharing economy. So I see this potential for us to really help consumers to vote with our choices on the sharing market. And of course, to help consumers to do that, we need to develop assessment tools to distinguish which sharing organizations are really socially or environmentally sustainable and which are not, as well as communication tools. We need to have these tools at hand that to help consumers make these choices on the market. So I think these are the two, the COVID, and then this balance, finding the possibility to balance economic feasibility of companies or organizations with sustainability aspirations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you're getting to the heart of these challenges. I like very much like the idea of teeny tiny trends. That's a new term I think we can work with in the future. But just continuing on this on this point, I mean, how do you think that urban sharing connects and is shaping sustainable lifestyles? So, in other words, how important is sharing to sustainability, and how big a role do you think it can play in this kind of shift in our sustainable lifestyle patterns, you might say?
Right. Absolutely. I'm thinking now I finished on this note that we as consumers can vote on the markets. And of course, this is part of the bigger picture. Consumer choices are very much dependent on the surrounding systems. And in that sense, I think that urban sharing really is an important way for society to slow resource loops through sharing cycles, through introducing this idea of circularity in consumption, in the use phase, because it can help us reduce this idling capacity of existing assets through intensifying their use. And as well, I think important is that what sharing economy is doing, or sharing ideas doing, is to help us institutionalize and normalize the idea of shared use, reuse, and sharing in society. So I think these three are really important. And of course, what we see is also that it's a bit confusing, the different shapes of sharing economy we see in different cities. And I would like to just strengthen that it's really, on one hand, urban sharing is not a panacea, but it's a really necessary approach to reduce impacts of consumption, but only if we are looking at the idling, the existing products and services in the society, not when companies are producing new things in order to offer them through this access over consumption arrangements. So this is one thing. Sustainable lifestyles, they are not individual per se. They are built, they have to be built into the infrastructure of societies. And this infrastructure has to capitalize on the existing resources and assets we have in society. And then, of course, also urban sharing for me links very much to sustainable lifestyles is because it puts spotlight on social and business innovation that is vital for driving significant changes in the way we currently live, but also for shaping sustainable lifestyles that rely on, again, more localized and circular production and consumption patterns. And perhaps finally is that I've already mentioned the role of consumers in our role as kind of on the market as purchasing or consuming goods, but also importantly in urban sharing, the passive role of consumers that we're used to receiving products on the market is changing towards being active co-producers of value, actively engaging in creating value in society, which really for me is linked to sustainable lifestyles.
Oh, fantastic start, Oksana. I feel I could continue to ask you question after question, but actually, I think we've actually arrived at a really good point to move on to a few other speakers. But I mean, a great start. I think you've really kind of led us into these discussions. So I'm actually going to continue on to some of our other speakers now. And I also just want to say there's some great points being made in the chat and so on. I'm also multitasking, looking at Oksana and looking at the chat at the same time. Fantastic start. Thank you very much, Oksana. If you could hear the applause, it would be really loud and roaring, but we'll just do one like that.